Hi everyone, welcome to our channel. So this is part 2 video on Angular 14 and using Angular material UI component library, we are going to implement the CRUD sample. So today our main focus is on to implement the read operation, and for binding the data, we are going to use the Angular material table. Okay. So first, before invoking the get API call in our Angular application, we need to create few more things. Okay. The first thing, I'm going to create a new component. Okay. So in this new Angular component, I am going to add my logic for invoking the get API call and render it to the Angular material table. Okay. So my new component I want to create is like uh, all students. Okay, so go to terminal. So instead of creating manually component like one ts file, one html file and one css file, instead of doing that I can use the benefit of CLI .NET sorry Angular CLI. So Angular CLI will use us the templated components. Okay, so the command for creating my new component is ng generate, and I want to create component, right? So component and the name of the component, I will name it like all students. Okay, and I don't want to create any test files, so I can add a flag like skip text. Okay, run the command, and here is you can see I got created the component file, all student component files like ts file, css file and html file, and automatically that component is imported to the app module. You can see the update, and if I check my project structure, okay, if I go to inside of the app folder, you can see my new component folder. Okay, so now first thing is I want to configure a route for this component. For that, we know we can go to app routing module. Okay. So in this array here you can see right routes with empty array. So in this array we can configure route for my components. Okay. So open the object and properties like path. So path is nothing but URL for that URL your component will be loaded. So I want to make my all student component as a home component. So home component means you can leave empty path, and you have to map the component. So for that you can use the component property. So for this route this component will be loaded. Okay, that is the logic, and component will be all students component and import it. It will automatically imports. Okay. So if I go to all components.html, I have some content, right? So if I go to my website, this content need to be rendered. Okay. So let's go to the website. See, this content is rendering. That means route is loading the appropriate component. Okay. Now the next thing is I have to create a service file, Angular service file. So in Angular, these service files are used for invoking the API calls. Okay, means in this file we are going to write our logic for invoking the API call. So for my demo, let me create a service file like student service file. Okay, so for this also we have a command to generate the file automatically. So ng generate. So I want service file, right? So it is service and name of the file. I'm going to name it like students, and I don't want any text files. Hyphen skip hyphen tests. Okay, and here you can see my CS file is students.service ts file is created. So if I check inside of the app folder, I can see my student.service file. Okay, so this is the service file, and here you can see service file is decorated with the injectable. That means this class can be injected into any component. Okay, at the rate injectable means it can be injectable file. Okay, and first thing is here into this constructor I want to inject a service like a HTTP client service. So first let me import the HTTP. import from @angular /common/http. From this, I want a service like HTTP client. Okay. So this service, on injecting this service into our student service constructor, we will get a default methods where we can invoke the API call. Okay. So let me inject private HTTP. Sorry. Variable name. I will name it like HTTP client and its type is HTTP client. Okay. Since we are importing the HTTP client service, right, we have to register the HTTP client module in our app module. Okay, so go to app module and import the HTTP client module. Okay, so that loads from the Angular common HTTP. So it must be imported in our module level. Okay, so that is the initial step for our service. Next, I want to create a response model. If you recall, here is our API, right? I want to create a model, nothing but some interface that represent the properties of this class. Okay. So let's create a one interface or a model for my API response. So for to generate a interface, I can use command like ng generate interface and name of the interface. I will name it like student. For interface, uh, CLI won't give any test file, so I no need to add the flag like skip text. Okay, so just run this command, and here you can see my file got created. Okay, if I search like student here, this is my interface. So I want to create as it is like this, right? So let's copy the response. These properties I want to add here. Okay, and format them. So ID will be number, first name will be string, last name will be string. Okay, string and number. So finally my response type interface looks like this. Okay, now we can implement our main logic for uh, read operation. Okay, I have already some sample data, right? Let me do first read operations in the CRUD. Create, read, update, delete. I am choosing to do first read operation. Okay, for that, first I want to implement a logic in my service file for invoking the API call. Okay, so let me create a method like get. Okay, so that get and it returns an observable of observable that loads from the RxJS. Okay, and I will get students array of data, right, for my get API. So this is the API I'm consuming. So I'm expecting returning array of API. So here what I will do, return. I'm going to use the HTTP client instance. I have already mentioned it will have default method, right? Since we are invoking get request right now, so it will have a method like get. Okay, and here I can specify the response type like student array. And here I have to pass the URL. What is my URL? Localhost 3000/student. So copy this endpoint and paste it. That's it, our API invocation logic. Now I have to render this response data into my all components by adding a material table in my all students component. So first go to all student HTML. Okay, here let me add a div, and inside of this div I want to add the material table. Okay, so to add that, go to Angular material page and components and look for the table. So here is the table, and here you can see sample example. Okay, so this is the nice uh, Angular material table. So I'm going to use this. So click on this view code. Okay, and I'm going to copy this table. Okay, I will explain slowly what is what. Okay, add it here. Okay, and let me remove the default comments. Those are not relevant to us. Okay, okay, this is my table. Since I am using material table, right, I must import the material module, sorry, mat table module. If you recall, when we added our toolbar component, we have imported mat toolbar module, right? Same way, we have to import the material table module. So for that, you scroll up, you can see the API tab. Okay, here you can see the import. Copy that import. Go to app module. Okay, add it here and add it inside of the imports array. Okay, we are done with that one. And first thing, here you can see some data source is there, right? So this is the default property of the material table. So what this data, if you see square brackets in Angular, that means some dynamic value it expecting. So this data source expecting array of data. It might be anything, but it is expecting the array of data. Okay, and this is a variable that must be contained in our all component TS file. But till now we don't have that variable. That is why it's showing error. Okay, so what it means, the API response we get array, right? That array must be passed to this data source. Okay, so for that, let me create a variable here, all students source. I will name it like all student source, and its type is student array. I am expecting results, right? And initially empty array. Now what I will do, I am assigning this variable to my data source property of the material table. You can see normal table decorated with the mat hyphen table means this is the material table. Okay, so that is good. And here you can see each ng container column definition. It represents one column. Okay, each one column. Each ng container here represents one column. And here column mat column definitions it is showing, right? So this is the column name, which is the unique name. Okay, and this name must be matched with the column array we are going to define initially. If you see here, displayed columns, it will be an array of string, nothing but our column names. These unique names must be first stored into this variable component variable array. Okay, if I will show you an example, you can understand. So go to overview. If you expand this and if you go to TS file, and here you can see display columns, right? And it is array. So whatever columns we want to display, first we have to register them individually. These are like unique names. Okay, any name you can give. These are like unique names. So these names must be given as a column definition names. Okay, for suppose if you given some XYZ here, where in this registration, and if that XYZ not added as a one of the column name, then we get error. For suppose here you given some XYZ and that XYZ not existing in this array, then we will get error because the names whatever registered must be given as a column attribute. Here you can see the mat column definition. Pass it as the name. Okay. So for my demo, let me first define my column names in my all components. Okay. So string array. I'm going to pass my column name. So I will copy those names from my student model. You can give any name, but I'm going to give the property names. Okay. ID, first name, last name, gender. So I want to display all these columns. I am registered into the display column, and it will be registered with in HTML here, mat header row. Okay, like this here in the two places means these are the header related mapping and these are the row related mapping. Okay, like this here we have to register. Okay, now we have registered our array of displayed columns, right? These must be given to the match cell definition. So here there is a match cell definition, right? Here we have to give an ID. Okay, first name. Okay, last name, gender, and we need one more container, so duplicate it, and here I can assign age. Okay, I have mapped my mat column definitions. Okay, and next thing is here is the table header. Here you can give any name, like my means nothing but our table headers, headings. Okay, name, this will be my first name. You can give direct strings here. Okay, last name, and gender, and this will be my age. Okay, and next thing you can see cell. TD means table data, right? So here mat cell. Here you can see mat cell definition reading an element variable. So this element variable automatically reads from the this data source, means where it will loop internally this data source. On looping, every record will be a element. So element dot property, nothing but each object will be pops out and that will be read as a element. So element dot or response property names we have to bind here. So our response property name is right ID. So element dot ID. This is actual data I am looping and accessing through element variable. So when you use for loop, we will have a variable, right? Same variable like this in the data source. Okay. And next thing, first name, last name, age. Okay. And save everything. So those are the major changes in my mat table. And if I go to all components, now I have to read the invoke the API call. So I will create a get method. So in this method, I have to invoke my API call in my service. So first inject the service. So private student service, okay. So this dot student service dot get dot subscribe. So on receiving the response data, I want to assign it back to my all data, all students data source. So this dot all student data source equal to data. So this data is nothing but the array of our students. Okay. And on component renders, this method gets invoked. So here ng on init is a Angular lifecycle method. Here you can see it's implement and on init. When we implement on init, we have to implement this method. Okay, so this is a lifecycle method. On component rendering, this method gets executed one time. So I'm going to call my get method inside of this method. Okay, so if I check my website, I must able to see the content. Okay, in my material table. Okay, if I go here, see I'm getting data, and if I inspect element and network call, If I reload again, see my API call is invoking and my response is coming and that response is rendering here. But here styling is bit awkward, right? So Angular only provides normal component. So some additional stylings we have to do manually. So here what I will do in all components, sorry, all student component CSS, let me add a table width like 80%. Okay. Now if I check, now it is little better, right? Table is expanded. But I want to center this table. So what I will do, so for centering, I will add a global flex CSS styles. Okay. For that, I am going to add the CSS in styles.css. So this is the root folder, not inside of the app. So if you observe per component, it is not a component CSS file. It is a global CSS file. Okay. So here I will create a class like container. So I can use wherever I want this container. Okay. So display type will be flex and align items, center, and justify content, center. Okay. So save it and let me add this container to my all student component HTML, and to this div let me add the class. If I reload my page, see now I am getting some space on both right and left hand side. Now I want little bit top padding. Okay, so for that what I will do, I will implement that at my component level. So for that I will go for all component.css, and here I will name a class like all students container. Okay, this is specific to my all student components. Okay, and some padding 20 pixels. Okay, and let me add this class to my div. It's not coming. Padding or all student container. Okay, so now I am getting little padding from menu and the table. Okay, so we are able to render our data. So we are done with our read operation. But here I want to explain few things about the Angular material table. I have mentioned, right? This display columns plays major role. Okay, for displaying whatever order here we are given, that order only content will be rendered. That means for suppose if I cut this ID here, okay, and if I add ID here at the end, now this column comes at the last. If I check in the output, see ID is now in the last. For suppose if I here we have age, right? If age column defined in the HTML and not added here, okay, then see age is not at all displaying. Okay, so sort order, sorry, rendering order and displaying of columns depend upon the column names. These column names what we specified in this array. Okay, so let me revert the changes. I want ID to be first. If I change and check, now ID is coming. Okay, so that's all about the Angular material. Okay, and there are lot of examples you can choose here. Okay, like how to implement pagination, sorting, everything, and expanding the row, everything will be, if you want you can check the example. So that's all about read operation. Next we are going to focus on create operation. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope this video delivered some useful content to you all. If you like the video, please do support me by liking my video as well as by subscribing to my channel Soon we are going to meet with new content. Until then, signing off.